Hello everybody, welcome to the Saroy channel. I've got the most fabulous Bigfoot encounter for you to listen to today. It actually comes from Niles, who sends us this wonderful story, a very romantic story for those of you who are romantically inclined, about his Bigfoot experience. So let's get started. He says here, it was in the early 80s, in 1982 to be more exact, and I was in love with the most beautiful girl in my class at school. Her name was Arabella Autumn Jolina. I know it's a long name, but it is as unique as she was. She was beautiful, with fair skin that was so white and translucent it was almost porcelain in its perfection. She had beautiful blue eyes as well as dark wavy hair with flecks of red in it. She was a stunner, and very bohemian in her manner and in the way that she dressed. While everyone dressed in the same 80s fashion at the time, Arabella was extraordinarily different. She put clothes together in an unusual way that was so eye-catching and alluring that even the girls at school would try to mimic her style. The one thing that was unusually mature about her was that she always appeared to not care what anybody thought of her, and she spoke her mind, which was a rare quality in a teenage girl at that time for sure. Some of the very confident, handsome boys in the school were very clearly attracted to her beauty and confidence. At the time, I was painfully shy, very skinny, and I was definitely not sought after by the girls at school. As you can imagine, even though I fancied Arabella very much, I considered her completely out of my league. There was no way a girl as unique and as clever and as beautiful and as intelligent as her would give me a second glance. I was sure of that. So you can imagine my surprise when I found out that the most popular boy in the class, the biggest catch as far as all the girls were concerned, his name was Toby Billingsgate, by the way, and boy was he a hell of a handsome fella. He was the captain of virtually every sports team, and he came from a very wealthy, well-to-do family. Another asset he had to his bow was he drove a very fancy, bright red 1980 Corvette sports car. What was there not to like as far as every young girl in the 1980s was concerned? Anyway, this chick magnet, so to speak, had asked Arabella out on a date, and she had knocked him back and blatantly said to him, "Toby, you're really not my type. Don't waste your time with me." This revelation went around the school like wildfire, as you can imagine, and down every passageway and every open locker was the whispering of students, horrified that the school stud had well and truly been rejected. This brush-off was an enigma to all the girls and a real turn-on for the boys, who were all too eager to try and win over the elusive and unobtainable Arabella. Even Toby, whom had been rejected by Arabella, continued to drool over her, like a besotted puppy longing for a bone. On one spring morning, I still remember the day as if it was yesterday, this gorgeous girl, Arabella, approached me as I was sitting at my desk during morning recess. I was trying to catch up with some math homework. I watched her in awe as she shook her mane of ravishing curls, and she smiled at me with the warmest smile that I've ever seen. "I think you and I should go out on a date, don't you?" she said. I was in shock. This gorgeous girl that every single guy in the school wanted to date was looking at me. Me, Mr. Skinny, with his thin body and boyish face and hazel brown eyes. What on earth could she see in me? Was she blind? Had she lost her mind? "Why?" I said. "Why do you want to date me?" "You're my type," she said, handing me her home phone number. "Don't forget to give me a ring tonight," she said, and with that she marched away, leaving me floored. Had I heard right, I thought? Did this gorgeous girl really want to date me? Or was this just some incredible dream that I was going to wake up from and find out that it wasn't really true? "What did she want with you?" asked Hunky Toby, who had been eyeing our conversation with distinct displeasure from a distance. I was embarrassed, to say the least. How was I going to tell this guy that this gorgeous girl fancied me over him? I knew he would not take it well, and so I lied blatantly and said, "Not sure. It was a little strange. I don't know what she wanted." That evening I phoned her, and believe me, I trembled. I put the phone down 3 times every time because I was so afraid. Finally, I plucked up the courage. "I knew it was you," she scolded. "Why did you keep putting the phone down on me? That wasn't nice. I could hear your breathing." We arranged to meet the following evening. "My parents are cool," she said. "As long as I'm back by 11 at the latest, they'll be fine." "Where shall we go?" I asked, half expecting that she wanted me to take her to a diner for a milkshake and a burger. "I'm a cheap date," she confessed. "I just want you to take me on a grand adventure, somewhere beautiful in nature if you like." Wow, I thought. She's cheap, she's romantic, and she's practical. I really like this girl, I thought, not just her appearance. We drove to a beautiful secluded spot in Montana, but I will not tell you where because even today it's as beautiful as it was all those years ago, and so I'm not divulging any details in order to keep this place strictly my own. "This is so beautiful," she said, opening the car door and peering up at the starry sky and pointing out at all the constellations. She reached for my hand and took it with a firm grip, and we walked around a wooded forest clearing. It was a beautiful walk, and I was as nervous as hell, I'm not going to lie. I was holding the hand of the most beautiful girl in the world. Thoughts were racing through my head at 1,000 miles an hour. Should I put my arm around her? Should I kiss her? I was terrified of rejection, and I had no experience with girls. Worse still, I had never kissed anyone before. Suppose I got it horribly wrong, I thought. "Stop overthinking," she laughed. "Just be spontaneous and everything's going to flow, I promise you." I was shocked. Had she read my thoughts, I wondered. At that moment, we heard a whistling sound coming from the woods. Arabella nudged me. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Some weirdo is walking around in the forest at the dead of night. Isn't that peculiar?" I had to acknowledge it was rather odd. I wondered who it could be. I must confess I've never heard someone ever whistle that well. It sounded like they were whistling a tune. "It sounds like a happy tune," laughed Arabella. I agreed it was a beautiful tune. It was a lovely whistle. We heard the whistling sound coming towards us, and the feet that accompanied the sound appeared to belong to a person that must have been very heavy or stocky, we thought. We could hear the sounds of twigs snapping and the rustle of leaves being brushed against by a body. This person, whoever he was, would be approaching us very soon, and I didn't want to be around when he did. I tried to quickly encourage Arabella to go back to the car, because the guy that was whistling could be a psycho, I warned her. "Don't be silly," she laughed. "You're crazy. Let's just hide behind that bush," she said, pointing to some hedgerow. "I'm dying to see who the whistler is, aren't you?" I was not pleased with the idea, because I was not nearly as curious as Arabella, but wanting to please my potential girlfriend, I was not about to refuse her any request. I was certainly glad that I'd parked my car at the left of the clearing, where it was invisible from where we were hiding, which would mean that the whistler, whoever he was, would not suspect that anyone else was around. It was then that we saw him. "What the heck?" I thought in horror. "What in the world are we looking at?" I kid you not, this creature was over 10 foot tall in height, and not less of that I can assure you. He must have been about 1,000 pounds in weight, which was why for a moment I did wonder if he was a bear. But the humanness of his gait made that thought impossible to consider. At this stage I was only seeing the back of the creature, and in the moonlight I could see that his hair colour was similar to Arabella, kind of dark with red highlights. When he turned around, I had the shock of my life. He had a primate, King Kong kind of look about him, and there was also a humanness to him as well. The creature continued to whistle the most beautiful tune, and we were mesmerized, enchanted, and horrified all at the same time, because don't get me wrong, we felt like we were facing a very dangerous predator. Next to him, our bodies were puny and pathetic by comparison. We knew that in one swipe, he could take our heads off just like that. His whole body was covered in hair, with the exception of his knees that were almost hairless, and there were hairless areas on his face. I could not see his face in detail because it was dark, but his head was cone-shaped and literally sat on top of a humongous pair of shoulders, so it was almost as if he didn't have a neck, if you know what I mean. One thing that really got my attention was the span of his chest that was 4 feet across, so he was exceedingly broad. His hairy, muscular arms were long and reached well beyond his knees. As for his legs, of course, they were positively rippling with dense muscle. I was impressed by the sheer strength and size of this creature, and in awe of it as well, and I also felt terribly afraid. Part of me just wanted to run, but I was terrified that if I moved even a finger on my hand, that this animal would hear me, and then locate our hiding place, and heaven knows what he would do next. The thought was terrifying. I did notice he was sniffing the air with his nostrils, which worried me exceedingly, because I do know that animals can pick up human smells easily, and especially the perfumes and shampoos we all tend to use. Tonight I had been heavy-handed on the aftershave, I have to admit, because of seeing Arabella, of course, so I worried that my smell would give me away. He smelt the air for a long time, almost considering the smell, and he even looked in the direction of where Arabella and I were hiding, almost as if he knew we were there. I did wonder if he did. He stopped sniffing and continued to whistle for a long while, and then he turned around and retreated back into the forest, whistling all the way. As he retreated, we heard his footsteps. We heard the sounds of twigs snapping behind him, as well as leaves brushing against his gargantuan form. And then he was gone, almost as swiftly as he had come. And there was silence. In the air there was the after smell, if you know what I mean, like you get when you go into a stable that has had a horse in it all night, and you smell that kind of horsey smell, or you smell a blanket that your unwashed dog has slept in for several days. It was that kind of odour, sweaty, dirty animal smell, combined with dirty trainers and smelly nappies all rolled into one. After the creature had gone, Arabella and I rushed to my car, and I accelerated the engine, and we were out of the clearing as fast as you could ever imagine. I drove our car to the nearest milkshake parlour I could, and we drank our chocolate milkshakes in silence, neither of us saying a word or even needing to say anything. I think we needed to have that sugar rush to kind of calm us down. Now I know why they often give sweet tea to people who've had a nasty shock. I dropped Arabella home that evening, kissing her on the cheek, and we said our goodbyes. But the next day at school we both retreated to the edge of the playground, whispering excitedly to each other about what had happened the previous night. "Did we really see what we saw last night?" she asked excitedly. "Was I dreaming, or did we see that big hairy ape man, or what?" "We did see him," I confessed. "What was he?" she asked. "I've no idea," I told her. In those days we'd never heard of Bigfoot. I have to tell you, all my fears of dating Arabella were gone in an instant. We were sharing a secret, and that secret bonded us together and made us inseparable at school. Anyway, we parted ways when Arabella went to art college in Houston. I did not see her for several years after that, until she moved back to our hometown. One day I was behind this lady in the bakery who was wearing a huge hat and a warm coat that completely covered her because it was one of those freezing days. 12, she said. "I'll have 12 of those chocolate donuts, please." My heart nearly missed a beat. I knew that voice. "Arabella," I said, and she turned around and looked at me. Our eyes met, and it was in that instant that the chemistry was reawakened and revitalized. Within 3 weeks of reuniting, we were both married in a civil ceremony at our registry office. We did not want to wait for a moment longer than we had to. We just wanted to commit to each other for life, and that is what we did. We are still married today, and our story is a happily ever after tale, because I am more in love with my wife today than all those years ago. She is an extraordinary woman. We have visited our special place many times and never seen the Sasquatch again, but we have warm feelings towards him because we do associate him with our getting together as a couple and falling so deeply in love. Arabella named our Sasquatch Whistler, and wherever Whistler is, I do hope he's okay and that he's still whistling those lovely tunes today. Hope my story was of interest to you and your listeners. Lovely story. Thank you so much, Niles, and good night and good evening to all of you. Till next time.